This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome into another edition of the Bartholomew Town Podcast, Rhode Island's podcast of record. It's Bill Bartholomew here with you. Hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend. Today, we welcome back to BTOWN Congressman Jim Langevin. And great to have the Congressman back here on the program. It's been a little while since we've had Congressman Langevin on the show, and we get into everything from local to national to global issues. Lots here for you today. And as always, a pleasure to have you here with us on the podcast out there. Remember, you can email me anytime, bill@ripodcast.com, or tweet at me at Bill Bartholomew. I also just posted the most recent edition of BTOWN Insider to our Patreon account. That's patreon.com/BartholomewTown, where for as little as $3 per month, you can help to sustain this program. Patreon.com/BartholomewTown. Okay, let's get right to it. A big episode here with Congressman Jim Langevin on BTOWN. All right, Congressman Langevin, welcome back to the show. Really appreciate it. And here we are. We were just discussing beforehand how Zoom has changed availability and flexibility and so on and so forth. Do you think you'll continue to utilize Zoom even post-pandemic?
Absolutely, for better or for worse.
Yeah,
it's it made the world a lot smaller, and because it allows us to be much more accessible. And no longer do we have to, per se, wait for a in-person meeting, especially if it's something of an urgent nature or pressing in time that or you want it to be relevant. You can jump on a Zoom as opposed to waiting days for a meeting.
Yeah, certainly.
I think these types of media platforms are here to stay.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly for someone like yourself, you've got a busy schedule back and forth between multiple areas. I mean, it's interesting that we're at this point where all of a sudden that you're more accessible in theory, even though there's complaints about, well, the state house is closed or this zoning board meeting is now not in person. And there's less interaction. It's kind of a give and take, I guess.
Right. There are trade-offs. I mean, in person is always better and more personable, and you can, read emotions better in a room, that type of thing. But, the upside is, again, as you said, you're much more accessible. And a big part of my job is to interact with my constituents, know what's on their minds, and try to be, receptive to and, in tune with what they're thinking and feeling. And, this is just another way to interact with constituents. We're always looking for those ways, whether it's in-person meetings in the office or going to site visits or doing town hall meetings or things of that nature. It's very the job has to be very interactive, and this is just now another platform to be able to do that.
So before we get into the issues, I mean, and this really is an issue, but the census results and a lot of people expected Rhode Island to lose a congressperson. That's not going to happen. I mean, this was kind of not discussed that much, that there could have been an issue where we would have to go from 2 to 1 congresspeople here. Number one, I'm sure that's relieving on a personal level, but then also for the state. I mean, that's great news.
Well, obviously everyone's thrilled with the outcome that Rhode Island does keep 2 congressional seats. This is about the people of Rhode Island and the federal resources that will be able to come to Rhode Island, because we got a full count, an accurate count, and certainly had we lost a seat, it's a loss of a vote in Congress, a loss of influence. So Rhode Island gets to keep those 2 votes, and as David and I continue to rise in seniority, you have more of an ability to influence public policy decisions. So, at the end of the day, I think, David and I would have been fine irrespective of what, would have happened. But the beneficiaries, of course, ultimately, the people of Rhode Island, that we were able to keep the 2 seats, and again, the federal dollars that come as a result of getting a full and accurate count.
Right. So starting with local issues, I mean, I think it was less than 2 weeks ago now, where you were at the Nonviolence Institute with the entire congressional delegation, Governor McKee, Attorney General Nerona, Mayor Lorza, Cedric Huntley, the executive director of the Nonviolence Institute. This was in the wake of a significant shooting, the largest in city history, that has sort of become, I want to say, a talking point, if you will, for some of the bigger issues with number of things. One, obviously guns. Number two, just the environmental factors of the urban core, education, after school programs, just things to do, optimism. Your takeaway from that meeting and from just in general, where looking at the state as a whole, even where we can go to improve outcomes and how we can avoid these types of basically combatants going against each other in the streets.
Yeah, it was important that we met that day to reaffirm our commitment to our communities in our state, the people in our state, to committing ourselves to, again, safe neighborhoods. People want their kids and their families to grow up in a safe environment where everyone can thrive. And gun violence is a major threat to that. And so I'm very concerned about the level of gun violence in our country. No place, including Rhode Island, is immune to, it seems, the gun violence that is taking place on an epidemic level. And we have to double down our efforts to try to get illegal guns off the streets, out of the hands of criminals or people that are not, that shouldn't have access to a firearm. So we're going to double down and work very hard to pass things like universal background checks and closing the Charleston loophole that would allow someone to get a gun if a background check isn't completed within 3 days. These are common sense gun safety legislation proposals and measures that will make a difference, I believe, in keeping guns out of the wrong hands.
With respect to, and it's important that you're from represent the second congressional district. Rhode Island's a city state at the end of the day. As the city of Providence goes, so too goes the rest of the state. And we get this sort of provincial attitude sometimes from people, I live in Westerly, so what happens in Providence doesn't have anything to do with me. What are you hearing from constituents about their concerns? Because look, these types of issues and having economic and educational and other challenges for people who grow up in this community, that impacts the state as a whole.
It does. It does affect the state as a whole. So, whether you're talking about gun violence issues or you're talking about education, we want safe communities and these safe communities everywhere. First of all, if we want to grow business here in Rhode Island, we want to attract business from out of state, you have to have a holistic, safe, inclusive environment. One of the first things that any business owner will ask, for example, if you think about locating to the state, and I remember being on the phone with Governor Raimondo and a call I had arranged with a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and they were talking about the possibility of coming to Rhode Island, and one of the first questions was, what's the education system like? What's the status of your colleges, universities? Because they need to know, are we going to have access to an educated, well-trained workforce? So all of these things are important. Now, certainly on the gun violence issue, I've been proud to lead on that. Certainly, co-sponsoring legislation that's going to keep guns out of the wrong hands, like universal background checks, and I also co-sponsor the ending the Charleston loophole issue, but also legislation that keeps deadbeat gun dealers accountable. For example, there's a high percentage of guns that are used in crimes that is sold from a very small percentage of gun dealers. So that something's clearly wrong there, and we've got to crack down on gun dealers that aren't doing things the right way. Another area I'm again leading on, separate and apart from that, is career and technical education. Talk about an educated workforce, trained workforce. Make sure that our young people have the skills to do jobs that are really relevant and will lead to good paying careers. So I co-chaired the Career and Technical Education Caucus, and I believe passionately in training our workforce, training our young people for these jobs that society really needs and that are good paying.
Sticking with the second congressional district, it's a district that is, in some ways, it's arguably turning red to a certain extent. In other words, that there was a lot more support for President Trump than there maybe were previous Republican candidates. What are you hearing from your constituents there as far as just the broad direction that the country's going in? What are they saying? And obviously they supported you, they elected you, and so on and so forth. But are you sensing Rhode Islanders in the 2nd Congressional District are satisfied with the direction the country's going right now?
Well, I certainly hope they're more satisfied now that we have President Joe Biden and Vice President Harris in the White House now, and leading our country in a direction of healing, first of all, but being more inclusive so that everyone can get ahead. This is something that, as a Democrat, certainly I care passionately about, and I want to make sure that we can grow policies that will make a difference. You think about just, for example, the American Rescue Plan that Congress just passed, led by President Biden and Vice President Harris, to try to achieve the dual goals of helping us to crush the virus, get through this pandemic, and keep our economy intact. Vitally important. So we provided more resources, obviously, for vaccines and getting shots in arms. Rhode Island just passed a fantastic milestone that we have over 70% of our population has at least one vaccine. So on the road to this herd immunity that we need to achieve. But we also sent out individual checks to individuals over approximately 165 million relief checks, provided direct relief to the American people to put money in their hands so that, again, help them to get through this pandemic, and especially helping those who have been laid off through no fault of their own because of the pandemic, but also helping small businesses with the PPP loans, and also the Save Our Restaurants Act. This is an effort to help those that have been hardest hit and keep the economy strong, so that we achieve the dual goal, again, of crushing the virus and keeping our economy intact, so that we come out stronger once the public health officials declare this pandemic over. And we're already seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. We're getting life back to normal. We all want our lives back, right? This has been a brutal year, and we're excited now that we've had people getting vaccinated and everything is opening back up, and hopefully getting life back to normal soon.
And I want to touch on your experiences through the pandemic. But one question: the PPP loans, should they be taxed? How should that be handled?
I don't think they should be taxed. First of all, Congress at the federal level, we made it clear that it's not taxable income at the federal level. So I think everyone really, that should be the model that we should follow.
If you're planning to get a COVID-19 vaccine, there are 3 ways to make that happen in Rhode Island. You can choose a state-run vaccination site, a regional or community-based clinic, or certain pharmacy locations. To learn more about all of these options, start at c19vaccineri.org. There you'll find all the information and links you need to make a decision and to schedule an appointment. That's c19vaccineri.org.
Folks, I don't know about you, but I am extremely excited for summer here in Rhode Island, particularly live music and a whole bunch of things, right? But live music right there on the forefront of that. And I've got something for you coming up on June 18th at the venue Dusk on Harris Avenue in Providence, Rhode Island, an outdoor concert featuring yours truly, new songs, new lineup, new normal. I guess that's the catchphrase, plus some great special guests. Friday, June 18th at dusk, right off of Route 10, right off of 95 on Harris Avenue in Providence, Rhode Island. We'll see you there. Your experiences during the pandemic, both in terms of professionally and then also personally, what was it like for you navigating this in terms of your own life? And then also, obviously, being in Congress, navigating this unforeseen or previously unseen challenge that, kind of makes the lunar landing, solving this thing, it kind of makes the lunar landing look like minor league compared to getting through this.
Yeah, and of course, you're balancing the dual issues of protecting your own health and the public's health, but doing the job and make sure that the people of Rhode Island are represented, and making sure that, every vote that, I'm there and making sure that my vote is cast on behalf of the people of Rhode Island. I certainly have was concerned on the public health side. In my own case, certainly I'm in a risk category. So, I knew that if I were to get the virus, I probably wouldn't do too well. I have to worry about just getting an average chest cold can turn into bronchitis or a collapsed lung. I've had that happen a couple times in my life, and it's a bit scary. So, certainly I was worried about that, but I also knew I have a responsibility to represent the people of Rhode Island. And I can remember the first vote when we were coming back in to pass the relief bill, that we didn't know if it was going to, we thought it could be perhaps a voice vote, and we could do it without necessarily having all the members come back. That was the goal. But there was one member on the Republican side that was threatening to call for a recorded vote, and that might result in a quorum call. And if we didn't have a quorum, we couldn't pass the bill. Well, that was too big a risk for me that we wouldn't get that relief out to people immediately. And so I got in my van at about 8 or 8:30 at night, drove through the night to Washington, and made sure I was there the next morning at 10 a.m. for that quorum call and the vote. So the bill ultimately passed, thankfully, and we got those the relief to where it needed to be, appropriating money, again, both for vaccines and antivirals, but also getting money out to people to help them to get through the pandemic.
Looking at cybersecurity, obviously the Colonial Pipeline is just an example of what could happen in a number of different sectors. You've been right on top of cybersecurity, and it's an area that we certainly have a tremendous amount of vulnerabilities, and it impacts our economy, it impacts our defense, just overall health as a nation state. What did you learn from that, and where do we go from here in terms of updating our cybersecurity infrastructure?
Yeah. So cybersecurity is the national security challenge of our time. It is the top national security threat by most national security experts would agree. We're not where we need to be yet, but getting better at it. So, I started on this issue more than a decade ago when I was chairing a subcommittee on the Homeland Security Committee that had jurisdiction over cyber, and I was given a briefing that showed how you could carry out a cyber attack on critical infrastructure. And I watched as basically they caused a generator to blow itself up by inserting some malware in the generator's logic code. And so it was a real wake-up call to understand how physical damage can be done through a cyber attack. What was more disturbing is I started holding briefings and hearings to see how secure we really were, asking the owners and operators of the electric grid, for example, how secure we are. And I was appalled and really disheartened by how unprepared the private sector was for this, thinking they were saying they were doing enough, but really not doing enough. So that became kind of a now a lifelong mission, it seems, to for over more than a decade now, of trying to improve our nation's cybersecurity. We've come a long way, but as we just saw with the Colonial Pipeline attack, through this ransomware attack, we're still not out of the woods. We're still glaring vulnerabilities that we need to double down on and we need to address so that we can protect both our critical infrastructure and the American people.
Yeah, it's such a challenge when you can't physically see the threat unless you're inside of coding and so on and so forth. It's an awesome challenge, to say the least.
And the Congress recognized that it was a challenge, and a couple of years ago passed and created what's called the Cyberspace Solarium Commission. It's a national commission passed in the National Defense Authorization Act. They created a 14-member commission with 4 members of Congress on it, and then cyber experts from in and out of government, including at the time Deputy Secretary of Defense, the Director of the FBI, representatives from the Department of Homeland Security, and the Director of National Intelligence Office. And we met for approximately a year, and our charge was to create a strategy that would protect the United States from cyber attacks of significant consequence. We issued a report at the end of that year or so that had 80 recommendations. We turned those 80 recommendations into 55 legislative proposals, and we were able to get 27 of them into the National Defense Authorization Act and enacted into law, including creating a national cyber director, and that the Senate confirmed, and also giving more authority to CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at DHS, which is responsible for protecting the .gov network, but also being the primary contact for private sector critical infrastructure, and it allowed CISA to give more authorities to do things like threat hunting on other government networks, which they did not have that authority before. So we're getting better at it, but we've got a long way to go.
Last question. Right now, global challenges, the global South, what's happening with COVID-19 in Brazil and in India, in West Asia, what's happening with Palestine and Israel, China. There are so many global challenges. How do you navigate those, and how do we get to a point where we can have some version of a peaceful resolution to all of those areas? Is it intellectual property rights sharing to resolve COVID? How do we broker a deal in between Israel and Palestine at this point that's sustainable? And with respect to other potential threats, how do we deal with this?
Yeah, there are no shortages of challenges and difficulties and threats in the international front, as there are here, here within the United States. But we get through these best by working collaboratively in partnership with our partners and allies around the world on the international front. So mutual cooperation and aid and assistance wherever possible, so that we get through the pandemic together. I know the United States is trying to do a lot to get resources to India, both vaccines and supplies. So again, we need to work in collaboration to protect all of us. With respect to the conflict in Israel and with between Israel and the Palestinians, it's really a tragic situation. I believe in Israel's right to defend itself, though, and they did. At the same time, there's loss of life on both sides, which is tragic. So I'm glad that there's a ceasefire that appears to be holding. Let's hope that is the case. But in the long-term solution here is going to be a two-state solution where the Israelis and the Palestinians can live side by side in peace. A Jewish state of Israel, an independent Jewish state of Israel, and also a Palestinian state for the Palestinian people. So that should be everyone's goal. We need to continue to work toward that direction. The challenge is, the problem is that Hamas is a terrorist organization, and they are committed to the destruction of Israel. And if they are going to be, the main obstacle to the problem, then somehow they've got to be sidelined, and we need to pursue diplomatic efforts on other fronts, unless Hamas is going to come to the table and negotiate in good faith. But if they're committed to the destruction of Israel, and there is zero chance that they want to see a peaceful resolution, how do you negotiate with an entity like that?
Are you concerned Israel is committed to, or do you believe Israel would be open to a two-state solution right now, that it doesn't have sort of a reciprocal philosophy when it comes to the Palestinians?
Well, I know that Israel has gone to great lengths over the years to reach out for peace, to try to achieve peace. Unfortunately, it hasn't gone as far as anyone had hoped in terms of meaningful results. But I know Israel continues to try. I'd like to see the same type of commitment on behalf of the Palestinians. Again, Hamas is a problem, and they. I don't know if there's a way to bring them to the table to really negotiate in earnest, but sadly it's the Palestinian people that are paying the price for inaction and the intransigence of Hamas. So I'm hoping that the international community and the friendly nations in the region, other Arab nations can be a part of the equation of hopefully bring the Palestinians to the table with the state of Israel and working out a long-term peace agreement. And the United States clearly can play a facilitating role. At the end of the day, though, it's got to be the two parties themselves that come up with the long-term resolution to Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But I've always believed that peace is possible when people truly want it.
Congressman Langevin, as always, thanks so much for your time and a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you.
Rhode Island's podcast of record, BTOWN.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.